Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Sarah Mitchell, in charge of our documentation department. Today, Sarah is going to be showing you different ways that you can preview your applications. But we're also here, of course, to answer your questions. That's why we call it a Q&A webcast. You can type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel, or you can send them to us at guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that the Alpha DevCon 2021 is coming up on the 5th of October. You can still get tickets for $3.99. They will slowly go up to $7.99 over the next couple of months. So if you're interested, now might be the time to get them. So that's all from me. Let's see if Sarah's here. Hello, Sarah. Are you there?
I am here. And for those of you who are wanting to get your tickets, I've pasted the link to this webpage right in the chat window there.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter so you can show us what you are up to.
All right. Ooh, hold on.
Sure.
I had an option to display all my monitors. That wasn't gonna look very good.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
You should
So
see
I'm
my
looking
screen.
I am. I'm seeing a PowerPoint.
Perfect. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
I see the PowerPoint presentation, and you're in edit mode.
I'm in edit mode. Okay.
I'm going to do from beginning, make it full screen. Very cool.
How about that?
Very nice. Yep.
Better?
Very professional.
All right. All right. Anyway, okay. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, welcome to Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A. As Dave pointed out, register for DevCon if you haven't yet. Highly recommend going. It's going to be an action-packed multi-day adventure with the team, and I'd love to see you guys there. So today we're going to talk about testing apps, and specifically the types of tools in Alpha Anywhere that are available to you to test your app before you ship it. And some of this you guys already know about, some of that you may not, but I'd like to just sort of go through and review everything that's in there today, and then also get back to the basics of what Alpha Anywhere can do, what you can do with it, how you use it to do something like build a simple app and get it out there for customers to use. It's been a while since we've visited a few of these topics, so now is a great time to start talking about it. So we're gonna start testing apps. Some of you, I think all of you should know like why you should test your app, but as just a few things here, like the main goal, making sure that your app works and does what you want it to do, making sure it looks good on your target devices, screen sizes, in the browsers you plan to run it. It's also a great way to experiment with features that maybe you're not familiar with, might be interested in including, experimenting with different layouts and design options, and then also discovering limitations, what you can do, discovering maybe that some of your ideas aren't a great idea after all, and then also, you know, digging into what gets generated and learning more about the underlying output from Alpha Anywhere, what actually gets shipped at the end of the day when you publish your app. So there are other reasons to test. Maybe it's a challenge for some of you, like, why do you test? If you don't test, why don't you test? Sort of questions to ask. Be interested to know. So in Alpha Anywhere, there are a lot of different tools available to you. Some of these are tools in the IDE. Some of these are apps that we've provided for you that you can test in. And then this final one on the list, publishing, is the ultimate testing tool. You publish your application up on a website somewhere, or build your mobile app and install it using TestFlight or through Android Studio somehow, and try out the final product before you finally ship it. So taking a look at some of the early options to you that are in the Alpha Anywhere IDE, we have two preview modes, and these are found in the component builder. One of them is called Working Preview, and the other one is called Live Preview. And these two previews have their strengths and their weaknesses, but they are both good options when developing your components to test things early, just to get an idea of what you're putting together and see if it's going to work, and find any issues early on that you need to fix, accidental typos when you're writing a script causing an error or something like that. So the first one we're going to talk about is Working Preview. It runs your component in an emulated environment. Both environments are a web browser based environment. And then there's two ways to preview. You can preview as if it was running in a web browser on your desktop, or you can turn on the mobile option, which emulates it inside of a little mobile preview window. One of the major benefits of Working Preview is that you can actually take it out of the interface. You can undock it and put it up side by side with the design tab in the component builder. If you've got two monitors, you can put that off on another monitor. And then as you're editing, you can actually just update the Working Preview right there and see what you're getting. You also have access to both the XBasic and Chrome debugger using Working Preview. But there's a lot of drawbacks with Working Preview. Some things you can't test. You can't test security. There's no emulator for security because it doesn't use the because it doesn't use the application server, which we'll talk about in the next slide. You have no access to XBasic server objects. The types of objects that this refers to is primarily the context object, context.security, context.request, context.session. That object doesn't exist. So if you wanted to write a server-side script that uses it, it's not gonna work in Working Preview. And then also, Working Preview is not a browser. It's not your mobile device, so it doesn't have the full context of your target environment. And because of that, you can't test Cordova features. And then also, Working Preview is just looking at a singular component. It's not your whole app if your app is going to be multiple components. It's just a portion of your app. By comparison, Live Preview is also an emulated environment, both the browser and the web. It emulates security groups. So the Live Preview uses the built-in development server that comes in the Alpha Anywhere development environment to run your app, whereas Working Preview just simulates it, but it doesn't exist. So that gives you access to emulating your active security groups. It gives you access to the XBasic server objects. And then also you here also have access to XBasic and Chrome debuggers because both Live and Working Preview use an embedded version of Chrome when they render your app. Live Preview cannot be undocked like you can with Working Preview, so that's a bit of a drawback there if that's a feature you like. It also has some of the same limitations. It lacks the full context of your target environment. You're still only testing a portion of your app, and you can't test the Cordova plugins. So before I move on, I wanted to actually take a look.
Actually, before you move on, would it be possible to show Working Preview in a second screen? Someone was interested in how that worked.
Yeah, let me see if I can. I think I just have to hit escape. Mm-hmm. There we go. I was going to show both of them now, yeah. I'm going to launch Community Edition. Here, let's make a new workspace here. And I'm just going to make a new UX component here. Oh no, oops, I created a new web page. Maximize that, select all files, new, web component, UX, next. Okay. And then we'll add a button. We'll give it the text click me, and we'll give it a sub-theme of primary. Okay. So what I just did here is I just added a UX component, added a button on it. The button doesn't do anything yet, and I'm going to save it. I'm just going to call it button for now. So the two previews that I just mentioned, they're up here at the top. So we are here on the design tab in the builder, but right here we have live preview and working preview. And we'll look at working preview first. So down here on the bottom, you'll find some of those features I was talking about. You can open the Chrome debugger here, which gives you access to the JavaScript debugger in this environment. So if you've got custom JavaScript you've written that isn't quite working, or you see a pop-up that says something like JavaScript error, you can use this to kind of investigate, figure out what's going on. You can also use elements here to look at what was generated by Alpha Anywhere to build your app. This little icon up here is a picker, so you can actually click on different portions of the app here. If your Chrome debugger disappears, you just click on that link again to bring it back up. But here's the button that code that gets generated for our app here. And as you mouse over it, you can see things happen. So that's a little bit how you would use that. And then you can detach it, the working preview, by clicking this button here. And you can't see it because it opened up on my other monitor. But what this does is it creates a little modeless pop-up window that has these options. You can click this to refresh it at any time while you're editing it. It always stays on top. So like, for example here, if I came back here and I changed this to clickable, click OK, and then click refresh. There's our clickable button. Automatic refresh, if you turn it on, will automatically refresh this. Word of caution, if you do that and you have a very, very large component, refreshing can take some time. So it may be best in that situation to just leave it off until you're ready to change in preview. And then also here's your Chrome debugger button. So that's working preview. And this can go anywhere. You can go off screen if you wanted. To reattach it, all you have to do is close it, and it'll go back into that tab when you open it again. Live preview gives you these options. This red dot up here represents the development server. It's not running, so when I come in here and do a full preview, I'm gonna get a message asking me if I want to turn on the server, and I do. The only time you would not turn on the server is if you were already running it in another instance of Alpha Anywhere, which case you could say, no, I'm already running it. You could also say, no, wait, don't do that, and it'll cancel and go back. But down here, you have the same access to the Chrome debugger. So it's the same one you see on working preview. There's our little thing to select. Open that back up. And this actually can live off on another screen if you wanted it to. It stays open. But again, to use the console and the elements here to explore. And then as I mentioned before, you do have access to the XBasic debugger in both of these environments. And you can open the debugger by putting a debug1 statement in any of your server-side events. And when that server-side event is run and it encounters that code, such as in the onDialog initialize here, the Alpha Anywhere will open the XBasic debugger right on that line, at which point you can then use the tools to step through your script. So here we go. It's going to pause on with the arrow pointing to the next thing that's going to be executed. So our debugger statement is way up here at the top, right here on line 5. And if we use these buttons to say step. It's gonna step up. This is actually the code required to embed in a A5W page to output your component. But you can use these step, the trace, step out, run. Run will just continue execution. Halt will stop execution. But you have access to this debugger in both live preview and working preview. And there's that same breakpoint again. So in terms of when to use this, like definitely use live and working preview early on in your development. Learning how to use the XBasic debugger can save you a lot of time and effort in the long run when you're trying to figure out what's going wrong in your app. Maybe you got an Ajax callback and it's not doing what you expected, and being able to debug into it is a very good skill to learn. You also have access to the interactive window for both JavaScript and XBasic at any time, where you can just write up a simple script and run it and just see what it does. And then I had, let me see, open workspace. Let me close this. I was working in a workspace earlier where I'd set up security. I think it was this one. Yeah, so this is the, pardon me, my phone is buzzing. Set this up earlier. I've got this test component. It's got three little controls in it. They have security settings on them. This user one's only shown if they have user permissions. The administrator one is only shown if they have administrator permissions. And then everyone is shown to everyone. There's no security groups on it, so there's no restrictions. Anybody logged in or not logged in can see this control. And if you run this in working preview, you'll notice that you get just everyone, and there's nothing here to ask you like, hey, do you want to, like, what's your security permissions here? Like, the only case you can test here is this one. But if you live preview, you will get a prompt asking you what simulated security groups do you want to use. So say I'm working on a component, and if I'm an administrator, I should see like a settings button or something where I can go in and access like some high level functionality to control access to something on the back end, or make some sort of like change to somebody's account. The simulated security group, when you select that, will run your component as if you had logged into the security framework and you have the administrator privilege. So here we have our administrator and then also everyone, because everyone is available to everybody. If you go back in there into full preview again and say you want to look at the case for user, they shouldn't have that control. They should have something else, and you run it. It will run again, but only with that user group. So here we have user and everyone. So this is a way you can test to see if you've got your controls coded correctly for user permissions in live preview. And you don't have to pick just one. If you wanted to, you could come here and be like, I want all of these. All of these. Somebody has all of these administrative, all these group privileges, and it will, in this case, show us user administrator because we selected both of them. So that's security emulation. On the mobile side of things, there's a checkbox up here. If you check that, your app will render inside of a mobile preview. You can change which mobile preview to show using this drop-down options here. These are the ones we currently include. So we could do like iPhone 6 plus horizontal here. And this is a good tool to use if you've got if you've designed your app to handle different sizes of layouts. So maybe you've got a small device, not a lot of width, so you want to target one layout for that. But if the device has a lot of space, maybe you want to show everything as opposed to sectioning it off. So That's how you use this preview. All the same debugging tools in both cases of the with or without mobile enabled. Just be aware that all this is really doing is just sort of rendering your app in this little screen here, within this frame. It's still kind of still considered a web app at this point, so you're not going to have any access to your Cordova features, which you could add primarily through JavaScript actions. Okay. So in here under Action JavaScript, we have a selection. They're in the PhoneGap section. PhoneGap and Cordova are interchangeable. They mean the same thing at this point. But any of these features here that use like the Touch ID or Face ID features on the iOS device, or barcode scanning, these aren't. You can't really emulate these. You're not going to be able to run them in live or working preview. So you're going to have to look to another method for testing those. So that brings me back to my presentation. There we go. So other methods for testing. We're now going to move out of the Alpha Anywhere development environment and more onto devices like a web browser on your phone. And one of the easiest things you can do from the development environment to sort of start getting stuff outside of the IDE is doing a remote test. Now, remote test is still running a component, and it's still only emulating your security, but something that it lets you do that you can't do in live and working preview is that you can run a remote test on a mobile device or another computer that are on the same network as your development machine. So the way a remote test works, and we'll escape this and go back into Alpha Anywhere, is you click this remote test button up here. And what this does is it brings up a dialog. If you have security, it's going to ask you what security groups do you want to simulate in this remote test? And then it's going to ask you how you want to generate the URL. So the URL is it's a link to your app running on the development server in Alpha Anywhere. And there are several ways you can get that URL out and give it to someone else, or even just yourself. You can email it. Maybe your computer is on a company network and everybody has access to everything. You could, in theory, email that URL to somebody and say, hey, can you open this in your browser and click on a few things and tell me what you think? Kind of get some immediate feedback from someone if you're building an internal app. You can display a QR code of the URL, which you could then scan with a mobile device. You can even save that off. Here, we'll look at that one. You can also just copy the URL to a clipboard and do what you need to do with that. There's this fourth option to do nothing. Seems self-explanatory. But the way this works is it's going to ask you some information like how do you want to generate the host name, automatic, or IP address. There's this option here where you can list the IP addresses for your machine. If you click OK after selecting one, it inserts it. And then the query string is if you've set up page parameters, maybe you're feeding them into arguments or something on your component. It's not particularly common. I think a lot of people do not use this, but you could add these things here. A page parameter is added to a URL with a question mark, and then there's a name value pairing. So you could do something like specify maybe you've got a text box and you just want to use like a page parameter to
Question mark, zip
populate
code
it.
equals,
Yeah.
and
You
so
could do like zip code.
and then when that page opened, it knew to do something with that particular zip code, right?
I don't even know if that's a real zip code. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, you can amend that. So that's how you can pass things in. So if you pick this QR code, you click OK, it generates this page. This content is, I believe, selectable. So if you wanted to, you could copy it and then go off and find Microsoft Word or some other application that lets you paste in QR codes. It did not. It just pasted the URL. But that's one way of. I wonder if I can copy this. I cannot. Maybe I have to copy it separately. Yeah, it's not letting me paste it here. I know there's some apps that let you copy and paste image data. So, but you can pull that out of here. If you have your mobile device, you could scan it now. And as long as your mobile device and your desktop are on the same wireless network, it should be able to access it. You might run into issues with your firewall. If you've got one in place, it might not let other computers, other devices send like an inbound request to your machine saying, hey, load this page for me. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing a remote test. And then also same limitations as live and working preview and portion of your app. Can't test Cordova features. And then also all devices have to be on the same network is a bit of a limitation when you're doing a remote test. And if that's not something you can do in your office environment, then this may not be a good choice for you to do testing. But there's more. We added live tests recently in, I think within the last 6 months. I don't remember which specific release. It was a few releases ago, but one of the more recent ones. But live test is publishing your app to an application server and running it in a browser. It has a security framework. You can test your whole app. You have access to the JavaScript debugger within the browser itself. You don't have the XBasic debugger, and you can't test Cordova features because this is not building a mobile app. But using live test is very easy. This one is actually found here on the web projects control panel up here at the top. You'll see that little lightning bolt icon that looks the same as the one for remote test. But this one publishes your app, typically an A5W page, up to either the development server or Alpha Cloud for community edition users. If you have the full Alpha Anywhere IDE, I believe you also have options here for the classic server and the development server, or not the development server, the IIS server. This does require a server. Fortunately, there's one built into your IDE here. But what this does is it just publishes everything either locally or up to Alpha Cloud. Click OK. You have to have an A5W page. If you don't have one, you can create one from within your UX component. There's an option to save page, and we'll take a look at that after this finishes. But what this does is it publishes your app to a folder called live test in the case of the development server. On Alpha Cloud, we actually just generate a live test site for you on your account where you can go up and test it. And it gives you an option to interact with your app here. So because I don't have a login here, I actually can't set what security groups are being used, but you do have the full context of the security framework because it is running on the server. So had I added a login component to my app that I had to go through first before I could access this test page or this test component, I could have logged in as a user that had either administrator or user privileges, and it would have given me a different result based on that.
All right, so I have a related question, just going back to live preview. In live preview, can it also ask for a username and password if it's set up to do that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I think so
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah. You may still, though, be prompted to emulate the security environment.
Okay.
Just keep that in mind. So the live testing won't do that. And it might be a better situation to test in anyway, just because of the security emulation that happens in live preview.
I see, it'd be a better test.
It's a better test. And typically in apps that have a login, we see a lot of cases where logging in is independent of the app itself. So you're going to have multiple components in that case that you're going to want to test together, which is what live test gives you. And then just to show, if you have a cloud account, this is a nightly build. If we go through this process just to show you what it is. There we go. So this is just going to automatically generate a publishing profile to publish up to a live test page on Alpha Cloud. I believe that your live test will only exist for up to 15 minutes if you're not doing anything, if you're not making any callbacks to the server, at which point it'll spin down and it won't be available anymore. So live test is a temporary thing. It's not going to exist forever. If you want to do another live test, you can always run it again. And we'll go through this process every single time. And this part might take a bit of time. If you've never published to Alpha Cloud before and this is new to you, this is the Cloud View dialog, I believe. And what this is showing is just the progress of publishing the app to Alpha Cloud. It's open on the deployment events because when you publish to Alpha Cloud, it's actually a two-step process to get your app out on the web. The first is publishing, which is processes, packages, and uploads all your files to Alpha Cloud and gives it a version number. And then there's deployment, where it actually says, all right, go and put this on a server and make it accessible at a URL. And that's what this is showing here, is all those steps that happen to make that work. And when this finishes, this hyperlink here becomes active and you can click on it. This will take you to your page. So this is on Alpha Cloud. And at this point, I could, paste this in the chat window for other people to click on.
Ooh, let's do it.
And you should be able to access it. It's going to be temporary. It doesn't do anything.
It says everyone on my screen.
It
seems to work for me.
Yeah. So, this running a live test is a way to create something for somebody else to look at, either on the same network as you, with access to your development machine, because I was running on the development server, or if you have an Alpha Cloud account, now you've got something that you can test temporarily and give people a look at. It doesn't exist forever, so you have confidence knowing that if that URL leaks out beyond your office, no one can do anything with it, because eventually it's not going to be working anymore. But that's a way to get your app up and testing. And again, in the browser, you have access to the development tools. Hold on a second, let me open that up again. So this is Edge. I think F12, yeah. So F12 opens the Edge debugger, which is similar to the Chrome debugger. But here you've got the console where you can do JavaScript stuff. And then you also have network, which shows you what happens when your page is loaded, all the files that come back, how long that took. If you've got like a slow app, you could actually come in here and sort of figure out what is slow and maybe figure out ways to make it faster. So that's an option here. So, but again, no XBasic debugger, no Cordova, no mobile testing. So venturing into the realm of mobile for a bit, we do have several options for you to test in a mobile environment. The first one is Alpha Shell. It is an app you can download from the iOS and Google Play app stores, available in both now. It is it's a hybrid mobile app. It's one that we've built, we ship, and we manage for you. Using this does require that you have an app server, Alpha Cloud, or the IIS or Classic server running somewhere that is publicly accessible over the internet. And then again, if your app uses any data sources, if you've got a database that it needs to access, and this does apply to live testing on Alpha Cloud, that database needs to be reachable by the app server. So those are two things that are required to use Alpha Shell. Alpha Shell is though it's a way to test a component. So you test UX components in Alpha Shell. You can upload
But
or not
it's
upload.
really like all these things, really for testing.
It's for testing. Like
Compared
this one is
to alpha
strictly.
launch, where we get questions all the time, like, "What's the difference?" And I don't know if you're gonna.
We'll cover that later.
All
No
right.
spoilers.
I won't rush you. All right. So
So
spoilers.
yes, this is strictly a testing app. We do have more than one app available for doing app publishing. This is not. You're only testing a component. It only supports using the alpha theme. You cannot use like alpha blue or green or your own custom theme. That doesn't get used at all when that component is loaded. There's no XBasic debugger. You can only use the Cordova plugins that we've published in Alpha Shell. And whether or not security works is a bit of a gray area. I'm not 100% sure if you upload a login component into Alpha Shell that's going to work the way you think it should. So something to keep in mind. I'm only saying that because I haven't had a chance to really test it, and it is an area where there's a little bit of it's a bit of an unknown to figure out what's going to happen there. So I'm not going to demo this today. We have a whole webinar in Alpha Shell that I gave a couple months ago, or maybe over a month ago at this point. So we can get that link to you, or you can go and watch it and play with it there. And then another app that we have, which is geared more towards deployment, actually shipping your app, making it available to your customers, and they're going to use it, is called Alpha Launch, also available in the iOS apps and Google Play app stores. Again, it's a mobile app, so your application runs in a mobile environment. You test your whole app. Also requires an app server and requires that your databases can be reached by that app server. If your app requires a database, there's no XBasic debugger here either, and you can only use the Cordova plugins that we've included in Alpha Launch. Now, if either Alpha Shell or Alpha Launch are lacking plugins that you want to use, and you cannot be bothered to build your own app and get it out there for those purposes, you can contact us, and we are more than happy to quote you on what that would take to get your own custom version of either one.
We do include quite a few Cordova plugins. I mean, the things that you would commonly do, like access maybe a SQLite database, or
yes,
do a barcode scan, or grab a GPS location. Those are plugins that we do include. So there's a big red X to it saying you could only use those, but that you might not actually find that a limitation. You might actually find that we've got the ones you want already. So
right, yeah. So a lot of the plugins that we include in Alpha Anywhere are included in Alpha Launch and Alpha Shell. I believe there's a few cases where they're not. And we evaluate this all the time and decide to add things or remove them if we decide that they're not good anymore. But yeah, there's a lot of them. You can find a listing of them within the apps themselves. There's a help section that lists all the plugins that are in there. And so definitely worth checking out. And if this is all you need to blow your app internally, Alpha Launch is free. You can use it for that.
Right.
And so also we did a presentation on this very recently, and we can get you that. That demo and all those resources. I assume Dave is actually pulling up the links for those right now.
You're making quite an assumption, but I will be shortly.
They're pretty easy to find.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did that recently. And then finally, the final thing you can do for testing, and this is the one that requires the most work, but I strongly encourage you to do this before you ship something, is to build the final product. If you're gonna ship a mobile app in the App Store at the end of the day, like build a test version, get it into the hands of your customers, get them up on test flight, get a it's APK or something. I forget what the Android one is called, but get it out there, build it with Cordova CLI or Ionic App Flow, get it to your customers and get them to play with it, to test it. Publish your application to the app server on a test site, distribute it, run it through its paces, make sure you didn't miss anything. This runs in your final target environment. If it doesn't work in that environment, then it's not going to work. So, make sure you test it. You're testing your whole app, you're testing your security framework, your login, your requesting your reset passwords, all that good stuff. And you still have access to the debugging tools for the target environment. I believe Android has some sort of built-in debugging framework that you can connect to your device, so you can diagnose issues that are going to crop up in your custom Cordova plugins that you've included. Take advantage of those things, learn them. All of these require an app server. They're going to require a database, and they might require third-party tools and services like an AppFlow account or an Apple developer account, or other things that might be required. And then again, no XBasic debugger in these cases, but hopefully at this point you have figured out whether or not your XBasic script is going to work if you're at this phase in your development cycle. And then, learn how to use the app server logs. Log information can be your friend. It can alert to you when something's going wrong. If you've got an XBasic script that isn't running right, is throwing an error for some reason, we have an XBasic log on the application server you can go and look at. That log should always be empty, and if there's something in it, then you've got a problem, you need to fix it. So let's go take a look at that briefly, what that looks like. And I'm going to show Alpha Cloud. So if you go into Alpha Cloud here, and I believe it's View Cloud. Yes, View Cloud. This is a interface for looking at all the apps you've published, everything that's running. Let's look at that one. And it's going to show you the servers that were deployed, recent deployment events. And it also has these 6 tabs across the top. I'm going to click Update Usage and Logs so those download their data. But these are informational logs for you that you can use to diagnose issues with your apps, or maybe discover if something is going wrong with your app and you need to do something about it. The server load, which mine's probably going to look largely empty because Alpha Launch Test gets no traffic. But this is just going to show you over time, no, this is a very bad example. These are just charts and graphs. You can save this to file, but it shows you usage for your app, for your website. And then same with application requests is another sort of view, just to give you an idea of what kind of usage you've got. And then these last 4 are log files. We have IIS logs, which, if enabled, I think they're always in. I'll have to go dig into the info. Somewhere in here you can turn them on. It logs activity in your website, access, what kind of requests are being made to what pages. And the same with Alpha Anywhere logs. So IIS logs are at the higher level. These are things created by IIS, Microsoft's logging. And then Alpha Anywhere does its own separate level of logging. You know what? I'm going to pull up one that actually has something in it. Oop, that one's not even deployed. Is sampler deployed? Sampler is deployed. There we go. So this is still loading that data. I'm going to wait for this to stop. There we go. No logs on this guy either. Oh, I wonder if it's because of my time frame here.
Yep.
Let's go to 2019 first. Update. There we go. There's no usage because no one used it today or yesterday. There we go. There's something in here. So in here, it's server host name, and then by timestamp, you can come in here and click on these things, and it shows you. This is where you're in the Alpha Anywhere logs where you can find your XBasic errors. And if you've got one in here, you can go to text mode and read the text. or you can save it to a file. But in terms of these logs, like you want to check them periodically, especially in a production environment, just to see, like, do you have XBasic errors? XBasic errors aren't great. You really shouldn't have any of them. So that's an indication to you that something's going wrong. You should investigate it. And this has a bit of information about what that error is. So in this case, I had published my component using a newer version of Alpha Anywhere than the server I told it to run on in Alpha Cloud. So the fix for that was I just need to come in here and it's like, oh, I published my component with 5549, but my server is running 5507. I need to redeploy with 5509, and that fixes that problem. IIS request failed logs. If you get a request to your server and it comes back with an error, sometimes this contains more detailed information about what that is. And I believe the failed request has to be turned on. I will investigate a little bit more on CloudView here. So when we do a session later on Alpha Cloud, we can talk about this more in depth. But again, same info here. It's going to be organized by server host or a timestamp. Timestamp giving you an idea what day that error happened on or when the failed request log was created. And then this last one, which should always be empty. And if it's not empty, you need to send us the file, is crash dump files. And crash dump files only happen when we've screwed up on our end and have created a situation where your app just crashes. And there's nothing you can do about it on your end. It's something we have to investigate. So by and large, these are pretty rare. But if you ever see one, definitely download that file and send it to bugs@alphasoftware.com so we can investigate. But definitely, you know, learn these logs and use them when you're testing to see how people are, well, to track down if you've got problems. So there we go back here, publishing. So that's publishing. That's the end of what I've got. Very high level overview. We can certainly investigate and will investigate some of this stuff in more depth. Some of these things we've already investigated in depth recently. So those are resources that are available to you now.
So
at this point, I would like to open it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Sarah. So the videos for Alpha Launch and for Alpha Shell are in the chat window. If you want to go pick them up, you can also just grab them off the YouTube channel as well. They're all labeled there. The questions that we've had so far, we had a question earlier about what the best way is to go back to previous versions. If you upgrade and decide you don't know like what you've seen, what's sort of the best practice behind that? Would you have any suggestions?
So if you've updated your production and you want to roll back, hopefully you have a backup of the older version before you updated it that you can use. Because what you're gonna have to do in the case of the classic server in IIS is install the old version and republish your app with that older version up to the server. If you're running Alpha Cloud, that's much easier. Alpha Cloud has in the advanced section a deployments option, and if we pick like, I think it's this one. Nope. I will find one in here eventually. Here we go. Sampler has 22 application versions. So if I wanted to roll back, say I had published version 22 and
you want to go back to version 21.
Say I've published version 22 and I want to roll back. I can click add to schedule here and then pick one of the past versions. Note that I will have to also know what build to deploy that to. I do not believe it's going to know when you pick it. So you're going to want to know what version you had. But that's easy to do. You just come in here, you pick that last version, you'd be like, nope. And then apply the changes and let it publish immediately. If you don't want to go right away, you can schedule it using available start here. But that's how you would roll back with Alpha Cloud.
Easy.
Yeah. No, don't
Easier.
save my
I'll say.
changes. Easy mode. Yeah. With other application servers, there's no rollback integrated into them. So it would be a very good idea to have a plan yourself and, copy your project off somewhere safe, use source control or something, tag it with that release that you'd last published with, so you know at least what you had out there, and then test your
Test it.
app somewhere before you ship it, just to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row and there aren't any breaking changes in your app. I know with the recent changes we made with reports, in that we don't use the Uni printer anymore, it's not even available anymore. There might be some issues there with report generation that we didn't catch. So, testing that, making sure your reports generate as you expect before you put them out there for your customers is a good idea.
But keep it back up before you go forward.
Definitely back up, yeah.
Before you go forward, because when you open it up in a newer version of Alpha, it'll often go through and change your components to a new format that's not compatible with an older format.
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
it's
that
a
can
one-way
happen.
trip there. So make a backup.
Definitely make a backup.
Yep.
Yeah. Alpha
If you're
Anywhere
using
components are
GitHub,
not
that's a
backwards.
way of doing it.
Backwards
Want to roll
compatible.
back that way, but yeah.
Yeah.
Cool beans. We had. Someone said I sent links to both Alpha Launch and Alpha Launch. All right, hang on a second. I'll fix that.
It's so good. You should watch it twice.
It really is. All right. Well, I'll grab the Alpha Shell one.
It shouldn't be that hard to find Alpha Shell. They're in the same playlist, and I did them back
They're
to back.
right there. I know, exactly. Yeah, user error here. So we had a question about Cordova, which was, can you build a Cordova app and still use the cloud? Do those technologies work together?
Yeah, they do.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
And
yeah,
then,
Alpha Cloud is just server hosting. We host it for you instead of you putting the server up on ZebraHost or running your own server. And it handles all the AJAX callbacks from your app. So you definitely can use it with the cloud.
Yeah, fantastic. Another thing about Cordova, we had some questions about using Cordova for capturing image location, which of course you can. The plugin is terrific for that. But keep in mind, HTML has come a long way, and certain things that used to only be able to do in Cordova, like, for example, capture GPS coordinates, you can actually do in HTML5. So if it's not super important to you that you have, say, an offline capable application, you can still build these out as web applications without having to use Cordova if all you want to do is grab GPS. That'll happen in the background. Let's see if there are any other questions here. Oh, okay, here's one. Not that we'll necessarily know the answer, but lately when I publish an app to launch, and then I try to upgrade the app, I get an error saying that it's unable to download the manifest file. What might be the problem?
If it can't download the manifest file, you may have given it the wrong URL for where that manifest file is located. So the best way to test that is within the Alpha Launch publishing tool itself. And cancel. There's sorry, I just saw it after I clicked the button.
Okay.
There's this check if files were published correctly, and that will just go to the URL that you told it to look at for your manifest.
And see if you can get to it. Okay.
Yeah, see if you can get to it. The manifest file has a known URL, and you can certainly test it by loading it in a browser on your machine. I don't remember off the top of my head how that's done, but I believe we covered it in the Alpha Launcher video.
It could be. And there's that Alpha Shell video. Just found it. Put it in.
Yeah. And since we're on the subject of mobile, something to know when doing mobile app publishing is this cookie same site value. It's this new it's a new feature that was added about cookie access that specifies like how restrictive accessing your cookies should be. And for mobile, this actually cannot be set to strict. You need to set it to unset. and or I believe it can also work with none. And the reason for that is because your mobile app runs on your phone. So the URL is actually the local phone when it's running. So if it needs to do an AJAX callback or something that requires access to cookies and you've set it up to strict, it's like, okay, well, I have strict cookie access, so I can't read cookies from this website, the website being your mobile device, when in fact you actually do want to read those cookies. And I believe we use a few cookies in a few cases for just for session stuff.
Is that set to none by default?
No, I believe it gets set to strict by default.
I see. So
And
that's
I said that as a
your...
question because I couldn't remember when I made this project, but I actually made it earlier today. So yeah, it gets set to strict by default. So coming here and setting it to none is probably your best bet. You can do unset, at which point the device is going to decide what the behavior should be, and that might not be what you want it to be. So none is a good choice.
Excellent. It looks like we have come to the end of the questions, and we've gotten them done in time, unless someone's sneaking one more in. Give you about 10 seconds to do that. And if not, Sarah, I want to thank you very much for presenting today. Thank you everyone who attended. If you do have more questions, do send them to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. It's monitored by a team of people here. We will get back to you often rather quickly with the answer to your questions. Until then, we hope to see you at our next Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. Thanks very much and stay well. Bye-bye.